Hi, Richard.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Good. I can hear you.
Excellent.
Okay. See you. That's my computer advisor.
It's always good to have one of those around.
Yes.
Are you
Uh,
looking forward to this conversation and the conference coming up so much?
well, okay, if you say so.
I am. I'm looking forward to it. I think Kansas City is going to be very exciting.
Yes, it looks interesting place. I've never been.
Yeah, that I haven't been either, but I want some barbecue. I know that.
Yes, and I don't know
Along,
how much I'll see of the place once I get there.
that is true. You will be busy.
Yeah. When do you get there?
Thursday late morning, I think, which
Yeah.
I'm bummed about because I didn't realize there was an incredible panel Thursday morning, and I'm completely missing it. It's like
What?
Taya Miles and a bunch of other people who are just like incredible that I didn't even
I
look at
I
Thursday.
I didn't even know that. So what's
Yeah.
this? Just a discussion?
I think it's like a round table. I can't remember exactly what it is, but yeah, I'm gonna miss it. I'm gonna be flying. So
Yeah, well, I think I get there just after 9 o'clock in the morning.
okay, on Thursday.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I'll look for it.
How has your presidential term been?
There's nothing to it besides besides this. It's much more work being vice president.
Mm, okay.
You have to set up all the committees and things like that, but you don't do anything when you're president outside of show up and give an address, a lecture at which I think is Friday evening, but I'm not certain.
That is correct. 8 p.m.
Okay,
Friday. Very late.
okay, that's all right. I past my bedtime.
Well, that's good. So yeah, I mean you're mostly just kind of cruising on cruise control when you're president. That's good.
Well, you have to lead these executive meetings. There's one at what 1 o'clock, I think. Steve
On
said,
Thursday.
yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's it.
Hmm. Okay. Huh. Do you feel ready for the presidential address?
Yeah, I'm ready.
That's exciting.
I'm ready. So
I look forward to them.
yeah, I used to spend most of them in the bar, but but now I think I have to go to this one.
I think this one especially, yes.
I think I should
Yes.
go to one. I went to Joe's last year,
Yeah, same.
so
Well, that also makes sense. I mean, you are transitioning in.
yeah, to see what he was saying. Uh, so
You have not been to this if you haven't been to Kansas City, yeah, you haven't been to the conference hotel yet.
no, no, I don't
Yeah.
know what it's like. I talked to Debbie, who is the local organizing committee.
Hmm.
Uh, it seems like a nice hotel, and she says that the opening the opening ceremony, which is going to be a jazz performance, is up a hill outside the hotel. So she's arranged for transportation for those people who can't make it up. It sounds like a very steep hill,
Oh,
but it's
wow.
not.
Okay.
But it's not far away. It's only a block or so. So
Great. Okay. Well,
so
again, after the executive council meeting, we're having the new attendees reception.
Mhm.
So we were hoping, like Joe did last year, you might be
I'll
willing
be,
to say a few words welcoming first timers.
oh, okay. I'll be there.
Good.
I was there.
Great.
I went to it last year too.
Yes,
With watching people not knowing what the hell is going on and why they're there. And
that is
it's
right. Yep.
so I remember
Uh,
those days.
yeah,
Uh, yeah, I'll be at that because I think that's important. That's one of the good things that we do. Welcome people, the new people,
I
make them
agree.
feel as though they belong,
Yes, very
and,
important.
and then send them off to the bar or wherever it is they're supposed to go. You know?
To dinner and then to the reception, another
Yes,
reception, and another
yes.
reception.
That's what goes on.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
when are people joining us?
Kellie and Miller should be joining us any moment. And then
Okay,
at 3 p.m. Eastern,
Joe.
folks should be kind of trickling in to listen to the conversation. Also, hopefully, Joe. Yeah.
Yes,
Hopefully Joe is going to be here at 2:45. So anytime now.
yes, it's
Um,
2:52 your time. Where are you, by the way?
I'm in Dallas.
Oh, yeah. So you're the same time as me.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
central.
yeah.
The superior of the time zones, even though we're not thought as much.
I met somebody at a conference in Cambridge last week. That's Cambridge. That's the original Cambridge, that is. Who tells me that he is joining the history department to Dallas
Yes,
next?
Kevin. Kevin Waite?
Yes,
Oh, that's
yes,
excellent.
yeah.
Yeah, we're really
So,
excited to have him on board.
yeah.
He's very impressive. But yeah, and he's coming, he got the job and was able to defer for a year to finish up some work that he's doing at Durham. So we'll see
Well,
him
that's
next
good.
year. Yeah. I think
That's
he's going to
good.
be at the conference too. Um,
Oh, he is?
yeah,
Oh,
I think I
okay.
saw his name.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't talk to him about the conference because some people, because it's so close, the two conferences were so close. Normally
Mhm.
people from Branch come over. Some people come to the Southern, but I suspect not too many people will be there, but we'll see.
Mm,
So it looks like Kelly is trying to join us.
yes. Exciting.
Hi. Hi.
Hey, Kelly.
Hi. Sorry, I couldn't find, I just registered again so I could get the link because I was like, I think I have it, but have to make sure.
Perfect.
So how is everyone? Hi.
Hello,
Great.
hello.
Doing
Good.
What's
all
that?
right.
What's that big W behind your head?
Ah, Wellesley. I know this is my perfect backdrop of like publishing the book, the school, the whole nine yards.
Ah,
I love it.
Got to get it all in there.
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Kelly, I think you will know one of my friends, Khalil
Oh
Johnson.
yeah, Khalil Muhammad.
Yeah. Khalil Johnson.
Khalil Johnson.
Thought he
Hmm.
was at Wesley. He was at he was down here in Dallas for a year on a
Is he at
fellowship.
Wesleyan or Wellesley? Because everyone confuses the two.
Yes, yes,
And you
yes.
are talking to a deep South Southerner who does not know the difference between those schools. Yeah,
Probably
great
at Wesleyan.
question.
He's probably at Wesleyan. Like everyone confuses us. I can't tell you how many times I'm like, I'm at Wellesley College. And people are like, oh yeah, Wesleyan University. I'm like, no, no.
No.
But they're close because they're both in New England. I mean, one's in Connecticut
Yes.
and we're outside of Boston. And so
Okay.
yeah, we've even had people apply for jobs. Like, I'm so happy to apply to Wellesley University. And we're like, no, it's Wellesley College.
Uh,
We're a
yep.
girls' school.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, that
people,
is
people, yeah, always mess it up, but
well,
it's
I
all
will make sure that I confirm so I know next time.
I know. It happens all the time. I'm gonna step away for just a quick second. I just need to
Sure.
get water and I'll be right back.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, Miller.
Hey,
Hello.
I'm gonna email Joe really quick
okay.
to make sure we're good.
That's smart. If I don't talk much, there's a reason I shouldn't have to, but the whole team here got sick. So
Oh no.
yeah, we've got sick mother-in-law, sick me, Kat, and Elodie. So
Oh wow.
yeah, children will do that to you,
Yeah.
as I'm learning.
I'm sorry about that.
It's fine.
Are y'all still in Philly?
Yeah, we're in Philadelphia right now. So
Okay.
yeah, I'm in cloistered in a tiny room. Yeah.
Okay.
hmm
All right.
He wrote me this morning, so I assume he's up and about.
Just make sure he's not having any problems. Miller, this isn't gonna keep you from coming next week, is it?
Oh, I hope not.
Okay, me too.
Yeah.
It's such a special SHA conference. You can't miss this.
I don't
Might
think
be
I
like
will.
once in a generation thing.
Yeah. I have even prepared bringing my black hat and everything. I'm prepared.
Wait, like cowboy hat?
Yeah. I mean, when can you wear a cowboy hat in a formal setting except when the SHA and the WHA are
Oh
together?
man. Oh gosh.
Clearly has never been to a Texas State Historical Association meeting.
See, I got my PhD at a Texas university, but I didn't get to go to one of those.
Yeah,
Oh
no.
man.
Bryce is not UT or A&M. So
Yeah.
My mom was a professor at A&M for years. She retired
Oh,
a few years ago, but honestly, I'm really looking forward to going to Kansas City because they have a doll museum and I'm like
Oh,
super
wow.
into dolls. And so like I'm trying to
Kelly,
fly in early so I can go to the doll exhibit. They have like a black doll exhibit.
yes, they're coming to the public square
Oh,
at
they
the
are.
conference.
Oh,
Yeah,
good.
we have representatives from them. So look in the program and you can see what time they're going to be there and you can chat with, I think
Oh
it
my
might be like the
God.
director of the museum.
That would be fantastic because
Yeah.
I'm an old school like doll collector. I have a lot of Barbies, a lot of like just like historical dolls that I love. And so
Yes.
yeah, I'm excited. I get in like early in that Thursday morning, so I'm gonna try to go
Yeah.
before I like check in and all that stuff and then so should be
Excellent.
fun.
Excellent. Yeah.
I
I'm
think
trying to
Taya
remember that
Miles is speaking there too. Like they're doing
I,
yeah.
yes. And also, there's like I didn't even know there was that Thursday morning incredible panel. I think about like writing history, and she's on it, and I'm gonna
Yeah.
miss it, and I'm so bummed.
I know I'm gonna miss it too. I can't get in until Thursday. And so
Yeah.
and then even on Friday, I'm leaving on Friday. This is a quick trip for
Oh,
me. Like
wow.
I told my panel they were trying to push it back. I was like, please don't push it back. I have a plane. Like I cannot, I'll miss the whole panel. So
Oh,
so yeah, it's a quick trip. I have to get back for the Boston Book Festival is on Saturday.
ooh.
So I have to
Oh,
um
fun.
yeah, and I'm doing a panel for that too. So I gotta be back. So
Congrats. That's
it's a lot
wonderful.
going on. It's a busy time of the year. I
Yeah.
think everyone's just trying to get stuff in before the election, so it's like,
Um, just in case.
yeah, I know the world is. Let's just get this
Yeah.
in now.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Trying to
Oh,
stay optimistic over here.
yeah, I know.
Good
Oh.
afternoon, everybody.
Hey,
Hi,
Joe.
good
Great
to
to
see
Nice to
your
see
see you
you.
face.
all. Nice to see you. All right, so you're well into the conversation then, so I'll try to pick up and join in.
Yeah, I mean, we'll about like, 5 minutes. Hopefully
Okay.
people will start to kind of trickle in.
Yep.
And we'll I guess I can hand it over to you. Or Miller, do you want to be the person that hands it over to Joe and then Joe?
I'll let you do it. My voice is not exactly the strongest right now.
Okay.
I have a
Yeah.
cold, so yeah.
Okay.
All
So I'll
right.
just do a quick introduction of you, Joe, and then if
Okay.
you can do a quick introduction of Richard and Kelly.
Okay.
And it can be very casual and then
Yeah,
just
All right.
really, yeah, a conversation
yeah.
about bridging generational divides and creating connections between those.
Yep.
Super excited. I just
All right.
finished. I don't know if anyone's read, well, no, you haven't because it hasn't come out yet. Have you guys seen Making Sense of Slavery?
Ooh,
Yeah.
It's
no.
so good. It's by Scott Spillman, but it's like one long historiographical essay about like
No.
everything that has ever been written on slavery from like, the 19th century all the way up to Nicole Hannah-Jones. And it just like how it's not about slavery, it's about how we made sense of slavery, basically,
Hmm.
how we've written about it, talked about it. It's really good,
Wow.
thorough. Yeah.
That is fascinating.
I think
Huh.
it comes out, I think it'll be out in April or something like that. I'm not actually.
March 2025.
Okay, March. Yeah, March. Spring. So,
Ooh.
um,
Oh, this is going to be so good for
I
graduate
know. I
students. And I
know.
mean for us too, but like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah.
I'll mention it in the conversation, but
Excellent.
good.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. It's a lot to I mean he name drops everybody. Everybody. And it's quite the book.
Great.
All right. I had a question as to when we get to the question and answer, in other words, the public part of the program. Um, Whit or Miller, will one of you be looking at the chat area to see if there are questions there
Yeah,
that
we
could be
can both
responded to? Okay.
definitely, we can both keep an eye on I think yes, there is a chat function. So we can have that available for folks. And if we see anything, we can kind of come on and point
Okay.
you to that.
All
That
right.
sound okay, Miller?
Yeah, I can definitely do that.
Great.
That would be helpful.
Of course.
My eyesight is failing.
Oh, okay. We will
That
be
was
your
I
eyes,
mean,
Joe.
thank you. I didn't mean that in as much a
As
literal sense as a metaphorical sense,
Okay.
with multiple windows and screens and media and what have you. So
Yes,
I would
that
appreciate that.
makes
Listen, my
sense.
eyesight is definitely failing and I need glasses. And my husband's like, just get glasses. And I'm like, can't do it. Can't do
Mm-mm, mm-mm.
it. As I struggle to read like what's in front of me. It's bad.
Yes. Yep. I understand that. I'm getting out like the cell phone light, to like
Yeah.
make
If
sure that
you
I can see
saw
things
like
now.
how big the font is on my text, like
Uh-huh.
everyone makes fun of me because they're like, why is your font that big? I'm like,
Yeah.
listen, I just need to see it, okay?
And I don't need glasses.
Yeah, I know. Such denial.
Uh, Kelly, what's your panel? on Friday for the SHA?
On Friday, it is on sort of like the weapons of slavery, or the weapons of like 19th century weaponization. I mean, it's a bunch of different things. So it's like one person's looking at like how animals were used and weaponized against people. Another person's looking at bullets and gun ownership. Another person is looking at I gotta remember, it's one more. It's like there are 3 or 4 papers. So I'm just moderating. I'm not providing the comments. So it'll be more like a round table, but they're all really good topics. So I'm excited to see how each person sort of tackles them and stuff.
Yeah, that sounds great.
What time is that panel at?
It is at 10 a.m., I believe, on Friday morning.
All right.
So,
I was afraid of that because ours is at the exact same time. So.
oh no, oh man. I know that's the hard thing. You've got all these like really cool panels in. I'm trying not to miss the one that's on Harriet Tubman. I think that's at 9 a.m. But they have Etta, I'm forgetting Etta's last name. She just wrote that huge book on Harriet Tubman. That's coming out, and a bunch of other scholars that are writing on Tubman now. They're doing like a sort of a round table.
Fields Black, yeah.
Yeah, Fields Black. Thank you.
Condi,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a good. That's a good book too.
Yeah.
Good book.
Oh. Give it a few minutes as people begin to trickle in. Hello, everyone. Welcome to SHA History Across the Generations. Since we're just kind of coming up to our time, we'll give it a few more minutes here, and then we'll get started. We're chatting about the very exciting conference, the annual meeting for the SHA coming up next week. Hope everyone will be there.
I'm just excited for the barbecue tour.
Priorities.
I'm with you, there to eat.
Definitely. Joe, how does it feel to be on the other side of the presidency?
It feels good, actually. But as you know, the presidents remain engaged through the executive council for several years after stepping down. So it's not full retirement quite yet, but it feels good. Richard, you're only steps away from that, right, my friend? After you deliver your address, then
Yep,
you pass the gavel.
I have the gavel.
Good
I'm not
idea.
giving it. I'm not giving it up.
You're not?
I'll be the Papa Doc Duvalier of the SHA. I'll be president for life.
There you go. Seems to be a trend these days, doesn't
it?
Unfortunately.
Good.
Well, apparently, there was a bit of an issue. It wasn't just you, Kelly, with having to re-register.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
Why does Zoom do this to me again and again? Just try to thwart all my well-laid plans. But so folks might just keep on kind of coming in as we move forward. Thanks, Steve, for letting me know. I have no idea how to fix it. So here we are. But we are recording. So we will make sure that Steve and the communications team gets this conversation up on our YouTube channel, so people who aren't able to join us in the moment can watch later. So everybody cool to go ahead and get started? Wonderful. Thank y'all for joining. This is as I said before, the SHA History Across the Generations, an interview between two generations of historians and conversation about the ways that we can bridge that generational divide, what we can learn from one another, and how we can grow to make a better Southern history together. And we are really lucky to have two stellar historians joining us today, and also another stellar historian who is going to be moderating the conversation. And I will introduce him and then let him start the conversation. So we have with us the former president of the SHA, Joseph Patrick Reidy, who is a historian of the American Civil War. He is a professor emeritus and retired associate provost at Howard University. He has written many, many books, which we probably all have read, including The Illusions of Emancipation, The Pursuit of Freedom and Equality, and The Twilight of Slavery. So, Joe, I'm going to hand it off to you to introduce our two participants in this year's Across the Generations interview.
Thank you very much, Whitney. Let me begin by thanking you, Whitney, and also Miller Wright for organizing this series of conversations. I was fortunate enough to participate in last year, so it's a great honor for me to stay involved in the evolving conversation, discussion across the generation. And we're extremely pleased this afternoon to have with us Richard Blackett, who, as you know, is the current president of the association, and Kellie Carter-Jackson, who represents the younger generation of the two. Now, Richard is a little bit deceptive in his youthfulness, so you might mistake him for the younger generation. But just for the record, I thought I'd better qualify that. In any case, as many of you know, I could say that Richard needs no introduction, but I'll give him a brief one nonetheless. He is clearly one of the outstanding American scholars of abolition and the anti-slavery movement more broadly defined. In the Americas, but especially in the United States. He has contributed a virtual bibliography of his own important works, illuminating various aspects of the abolitionist movement, especially focusing on the contribution of African Americans. So from his major publications, Building the Anti-Slavery Wall, Beating Against the Barriers, his study of Thomas Marsh Chester, which is a gem in its own right, Divided Hearts, Britain and the American Civil War, Making Freedom, the Underground Railroad and the Politics of Slavery. The list goes on, and that's just the major publications. But of course, several years ago, when he published The Captive's Quest for Freedom, not only did he summarize much of the important findings of his prior work, but he pressed his own and our understanding in exciting the direction, especially focusing on the ways in which African Americans resisted the fugitive slave law and took various steps both to escape from slavery, but also to defend themselves and their communities against further depredations. So and that book, I should point out incidentally, was a finalist for the Lincoln Prize. So Richard is quite an expert on the subject, which is the topic for this afternoon, and we'll be happy to have him make that contribution. We're also very thrilled to have with us Dr. Kellie Carter-Jackson, who currently teaches at Wellesley College. She's an alum of Howard University, where I'm happy to say I met her as an undergraduate. And of course, I've followed her career very carefully ever since then. So I'm especially thrilled that she's able to join us this afternoon. Now, her first book, which was very well received, more or less put her on the scoreboard, so to speak, in terms of a person who was making significant contributions to understanding the 19th century struggle against slavery. It's titled Force and Freedom. If you haven't seen it yet, by all means, take it up, because what she does there, excuse me, is nothing less than remarkable in terms of indicating very clearly and very specifically the ways in which African American communities defended themselves and sought freedom and sought equality, often resorting to violence, but of course not arbitrary violence, but very systematically planned violence. And I think she uses the term, as Richard does too, of political violence, and that's one that we'll return to in a few minutes. But what I find especially compelling in her Force and Freedom is that she's exploring a kind of a theory of the use of violence, and violence being part of a gamut of responses that African Americans mustered up and discussed and debated by way of asserting their right to freedom and equality in the United States. So as I say, the book is really quite a blockbuster. Now, she has also most recently published a book that I think will also enable us to have a fruitful discussion. It's called We Refuse, A Forceful History of Black Resistance. And that just came out earlier this year. And here what she's doing is putting forceful resistance against oppression within a broad context. So it takes in anti-slavery, to be sure, but it goes far beyond that. And it further explores what I suggested a minute ago, what she sees as a kind of a theory and a praxis that involves both intellectual work as well as activism, that includes the use of force when appropriate to achieve the goals of freedom and equality. So there we have it in terms of the brief introductions to our two panelists today. Oh, and I forgot to mention Kellie's earlier book, The Force and Freedom, was a finalist for the Frederick Douglass Prize. So our colleagues come very well decorated, and we'll be happy to add accolades to their resumes this afternoon. Okay, I think I'd like to begin with a kind of a general question that I would pose to the both of them that would give them an opportunity to introduce themselves a little bit to the audience who has tuned in with us this afternoon. So I would simply ask, who and what are the influences that prompted you to explore the work that you have done, and especially to kind of bravely encounter this issue of political violence and to put a spin on it? And here I'm not talking in terms of journalistic spin, but I guess more properly, I should say, to bring analytical awareness of violence, not as an aberration, but as something that is a critical part of U.S. history, and certainly of African American history. So, Richard, may we defer to you in terms of your juniority?
Okay, the seniors get to put their neck out first. Okay, let me just say that people have asked me this question before, and there are two influences that I hark back to, and I don't mean to beat a nationalist drum here, but one of them, two of them, fellow Trinidadians. One taught at your old school at Howard in the 1940s, and wrote a book about the abolitionist movement that changed the way we see and understand anti-slavery activity. And that's Eric Williams. Mm-hmm. And as a kid growing up in Trinidad, I never read the book in Trinidad. I read the book when I got to university in England, which is strange. But he set certain boundaries and standards of both research and interpretation that has always influenced me. And the other one was Eric Williams, high school teacher, C.L.R. James, who wrote another blockbuster, which I have always envied him about, and that's Black Jacobins, mm-hmm. In which the center of which stands this whole the search for freedom and liberation of oppressed people. And C.L.R. James later in his life became very involved in American politics in one way or another, and did the lecture circuits of American universities. And when I taught at the University of Pittsburgh, I brought him to the campus a couple times to lecture in his own inimitable style. If you have never seen C.L.R. James lecture, it is something to behold. And so those were the two most probably inspirations. And the second comes later, and that's the third person would be Edward Thompson, E.P. Thompson, mm-hmm. who again points me in directions that uh, I didn't, unlike other people, I do not take theories to my study. I let my study help me search for theories about the nature of things. And in all of those, in those three authors, I find ways to do not only to build what you're doing on deep research, but also to let that research inform your views of what you have found.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, uh, those have led me to this whole interest in how people struggle for freedom and their independence.
Hmm. That's good. I feel like I would echo that. I mean, Eric Williams and C.L.R. James are always at the top of my list. You know, you've got your top 10, top 5 card. I would probably add another Caribbean writer to that, which is Frantz Fanon. You know, when I read Wretched of the Earth, I was blown away. And he's still always sort of in the back of my mind when I think about violence and the state and oppression and how we sort of grapple with this and make sense of it. Fanon has always stuck with me. The Usual Suspects, W.E.B. Du Bois has always been on my sort of top 3 list of scholars that, one, I love the way he writes. He writes in a way that is very like forceful, and he packs a punch in his writing, and I wanted to be able to do the same thing as well. And sort of he even sort of has like these snarky undertones that I just love reading. I love reading passionate writing. And so Frantz Fanon, Du Bois, Benjamin Quarles was always like a hero of mine, because he taught at Morgan State for so long. He stayed at HBCU. He understood the power of HBCUs. It's from Benjamin Quarles when we get the idea that Black abolitionists are the first abolitionists. You know, no one needed to tell people that slavery was wrong. They knew that and had been advocating for that the moment they were enslaved. And so Quarles writes so many books that I turn to, especially in graduate school, that just have, you know, shaped my identity. But then I would even add to that Deborah Gray White. I think adding the gender component to the abolitionist movement and slavery is so important. And I think of her really as the pioneer when it comes to Black women's history and thinking about the role that is often overlooked, which is the tremendous role that Black women play. And so there's a lot of people I could add on that list, but I will stick with them too. I think that they've really pushed me to think about violence and not just violence but force. We sort of touched on this earlier, but like, you know, Barbara Fields taught me this. She said violence is always forceful, but force is not necessarily violent. And so what does force look like? Can it be a strike? Is it a boycott? Is it your vote? Is it your voice? Is it, you know, withdrawal? Is it advancement? Like force is a lot of different things. And so even more so than violence, I'm really looking at how we employ the tactic of force.
I should add to your list also Benjamin Quarles.
Yeah.
Years ago, when I started playing around in this sandpit, I read an article he published in the Journal of Negro History called "A Duet with with John Bull," in which he talked about the Black Americans who went to England in the antebellum period to try and influence public opinion, and I was hooked. I was hooked. Yeah. And I had not too many conversations with him, but one of the things that struck me in talking to him is the man's modesty. That when you read his stuff, it just grabs you, and he had a wry sense of humor. And sometimes I go back and read Black abolitionists, and I try to see if I could locate where he comes up with some of his comments on people and individuals.
Yeah.
So those I would add Benjamin Quarles. I mean, I think he's absolutely critical to everything I have ever written, and so he's a major force behind everything.
Yeah.
that I've tried to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me try to bring matters more up to where you see your work vis-a-vis what other scholars are doing at this time. And I'm saying this in part because a lot of the earlier discussions around the topics that both of you write about were often locked into these old-fashioned paradigms, if I may use a new term here, that more or less pitted violence against nonviolence, for example, slave rebellion versus day-to-day resistance versus whatever, paternalism, let's say, as another point along that spectrum. But it seems as though over the last 30 years, at least, there's been a lot more direct focus on how and why and when African Americans did or didn't do what they did or didn't do to become free, to advance the cause of freedom, to destroy slavery, and to promote equality. So a lot of the works that I'm speaking of here over the last 30 years have come at that from very different angles. Mm-hmm. Some of which look at, say, political violence from the standpoint of larger systems, call it capitalism, call it the U.S. state, more recently call it whatever you will, a police state perhaps. And there are very important insights, I think, that come out of that approach to this. But you're taking a somewhat different approach to that, and others are too. And there's still important work being done on slave rebellions, for example. We know that. Harriet Tubman, who you mentioned, Kellie, and the focus there on what she did during the Civil War, and in fact, long before the Civil War, that often involved her bearing weapons and using weapons to advance freedom and equality. So how do you see your work kind of shaping up against that other work that takes this global approach to political violence, but does it in a way that is sensitive to the fact that African Americans are actors within that framework and not simply victims? Kellie, you want to start?
Yeah.
Richard?
Sure. I've done this in Force and Freedom, but I'm also doing this in We Refuse as well, which is I'm actively trying to move beyond binaries, like these dichotomies of it's violent or it's nonviolent, it's accommodation or it's resistance, it's this or it's that. I feel like sometimes we get pigeonholed in those concepts and those ideas, and it's very limiting. And so one of the things I'm trying to do is expand the tools that Black people have in front of them. And so in We Refuse, it's made up of 5 chapters that looks at like how have Black people combated slavery and white supremacy and racism. And I look at revolution, I look at protection, I look at force, I look at flight, and I look at joy. And these aren't, these 5 chapters are not exhaustive by any means. There's a lot of tools that Black people have, but part of my goal in talking about the different ways that Black people have either used revolution or created like an underground railroad for protection, or they've, used flight and basically said, we're out, we're going to England, we're going to Haiti, we're going to Canada, we're going to Africa, or the ways that they have carved out space for themselves, snatched joy for themselves. Stephanie Camp writes about this a lot, sort of like pleasure politics. How have Black people created or moved beyond like the boundaries of slavery to get access to their own humanity and to find joy and pleasure for themselves? So I'm thinking about all of these ways in which Black people are moving beyond the typical, what we might think of tools of resistance, and trying to get us to be a little bit more creative about how we get at what combating white supremacy can look like. And so I think it's liberating for me to write about because I get to approach subjects in just different ways, but I think it's also really useful for students to think that like, no, these binaries haven't always served us very well. And there's a lot of work that can be done in the field of slavery, in the field of abolition. And like, what things could you imagine might be useful to a person who is up against white supremacy? What tools have you found useful in your own life? What tools have you been told have been very effective or not effective? And then like, how do we tease out really utility, because I think we don't talk enough about what doesn't work. We spend a lot of time sort of looking at trying to find solutions, but I think there's a utility in being able to say, hey, we tried this tool, it's not very effective. This hammer doesn't work. And so that's really been my mode of operatus, is trying to expand the canon in ways that allow us to think about the spectrum of tools that are available, and not just binaries.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful approach, Kelly. I look forward to reading the book, but you will have to forgive me if you know that I have to use my 7-year law. If the book is still being read after 7 years, I will read it. Otherwise, I spend my entire time reading other people's books.
Yeah.
So I'm just about getting ready to read Joe's book. Right?
You didn't have to say that, Richard. I know it hasn't been 7 years yet. So,
well, it's getting there. It's getting there. No, but I think one of the interesting things, and I know these things come in cycles, and it becomes sort of the in thing to do, but there's a kind of burgeoning industry in looking at fugitive slaves.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that I think this matters is because it provides us with an opportunity to re-examine the abolitionist movement and what it stood for. And Kelly does a bit of that in her first book. But here's where I suggest that by looking at fugitive slaves, they force, so to speak, the abolitionist movement to look at ways other than moral suasion.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to be practical. You have to help these people. These people are descending on you, and you look around and you say, but I'm opposed to slavery, and here are all these people, what do I do? And I think they have a profound influence on the abolitionist movement. And by their activity, they continue to push that movement towards a place that it didn't want to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that makes for some interesting new studies that are taking place. So force, as Kelly would call it, becomes part of that effort to bring change about in the society. And secondarily, it poses the question, how does a minority oppress people in a racist society confront their oppression? And therefore, they must employ multiple means in order to remove it.
Yeah.
And some of it is flight, as Kelly is describing in her new book. They come up with multiple ways of dealing with this thing. And it is that we need to look into more deeply. And I think that expands our horizon, the new horizon of what I would call anti-slavery studies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it inheres in some of, I mean, if I wrote a book on my last book on Samuel Ringgold Ward, who Kelly, the book Kelly very kindly and generously reviewed. And it is a life of frustration and struggle.
Yeah.
on a whole multiple set of levels.
Mm-hmm.
And there are times when he gives up on this thing called America, because it is offering him nothing that is new. He gives up on it because he is unable to live a reasonable life in the society. He tries his luck somewhere else in a majority country, and he still doesn't get what he wants. And the frustration is so deep and frustrating toward that he almost pushes you to become a psychologist, which I am not. And I don't. And as I say, I don't play in that sandbox. I don't try. I don't try and get into people's head, but it really is that expression of minority struggle against
Mhm.
oppression is at the heart of everything that we do as we try to understand more fully American history.
I mean, I just want to say that your biography on Ward is so rich and good because that frustration is like that represents the Black experience. You know, how many people were like Ward that were trying and trying and trying and trying, and sometimes they saw victory, but oftentimes they saw failure. And so how do you make sense of that? And especially when you get to the end of your life, how do you determine where you go from there? And it's a that book to me just represents so much of like the frustration of and how difficult it is to navigate white supremacy inside and outside of slavery. And it was really well done. So yeah.
Oh, well, I'll buy you a glass of wine when it says.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere, Richard.
Yes.
Bottoms up. Um, well, Richard, I appreciate what you said about the new insights into the abolitionist movement and the way the fugitive slaves were pressing a lot of that, because I think you did that brilliantly in The Captive's Quest for Freedom. I mean, literally every page is another story that illustrates exactly that point. And of course, you made of that what should have been and could have been made in terms of delineating how that impacted the larger movement and by extension all of American history. And there's clearly a lot of leads there that our colleagues and perhaps future generations of students can also follow and I think continue to pursue very fruitfully. But I thought what I would do, picking up on a little bit about what you said with the Samuel Ringgold Award in particular, but also more generally your comments, Kellie, about getting a picture that to some extent involves struggling every day to survive.
Mhm.
And there are various situations in which different tactics are more useful.
Mhm.
And keeping in mind what Richard, you were just saying about Ward, who had this kind of cloud bordering on despair hanging over him for much of his life. So then the question becomes one, where does survival end up politically? And here, I don't want to misspeak here, but I'm not suggesting that oppression necessarily leads to despair, but for ways out of the oppression. That might include violence at some point or another. That certainly would include some sort of a political movement. So what's the bridge between survival and moving beyond the need to survive under these kinds of oppressive conditions? So in the 19th century, it looked like abolition.
Yeah.
Well, lo and behold, we found out the end of slavery was not the end of oppression. So,
Yeah.
the struggle goes on, so to speak. But what I'm asking really is, what do your studies suggest as avenues for moving beyond survival to a new world?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things, the last chapter in my book, and We Refuse That chapter is on joy. And I know that joy has become like this buzzword now. It's what people talk about. It feels like a vibe, all of that. But I think that joy is revolutionary. I think that joy is actually an act of resistance. I think joy is insistence on your humanity, the way that you carve out and protect and exhibit your own humanity is through joy. And joy is oftentimes tethered to oppression. It's tethered to suffering. It is a way of trying to pull through your own grief. And so there's a moment I talk about, Stephanie Camp writes about this in her book as well, where this woman named Nancy, who's enslaved, she gets free at the time of the Civil War. But before that, while she's enslaved in Virginia, she talked about how she would run away from her plantation go deep out into the woods, miles into the woods, and enslaved people would throw these parties. And they would play music and they would drink and they would have dance competitions. And she would, have men bet on her. She would balance a glass of water on her head and try to dance without spilling a drop. And just the sheer joy that she had by participating in these illicit, illegal dance parties, how she, made her own dress. She stole material to make her own yellow dress. She carved, her own shoes. She painted the shoes yellow. She stole everything she needed to make her outfit. And how she looked back at that moment while she's being interviewed as part of like the WPA interviews of this moment with just pride and joy. And these are not things, ideas you would associate with in slavery. You would say, there, of course, your whole life was tragedy. Your whole life was violent and oppressive. And she's looking back on this moment with fondness, as though, oh, those were good times. We went out of the woods. We didn't get caught. Like we knew the risks if we did. And to me, I think that's a lesson for how we should navigate even today when we think about like, yes, times are absolutely hard and it is absolutely difficult and challenging, the world that we live in politically, socially, economically. But there are places and spaces that we can go to seek out a reprieve, a respite, a joy for ourselves. And that work matters, that it's not trivial, it's not superficial to rest, to take a nap, to do a vacation, to find a way to sort of fulfill yourself and fortify yourself, then to go back out in the fight again. And seeing that, I think, is important. It's not a way of saying like, see, slavery wasn't all that bad. That's not what the story is about. The story is about finding out how Black people survived. And part of that was creating space to dance and sing and get drunk. and that's not, to me, that's not trivial at all.
Richard?
No, I am impressed. I think she's absolutely correct. That's why, from the outside, I've never understood the temperance movement. I mean, and people who were temperance advocates because they were compelled to become temperance advocates by the sheer weight of pressure and movement, and other people who fell off the cart, the wagon, and came back on. And there's a wonderful quote in a description of Ward, who said he wasn't averse to holding a glass. Now, it didn't say what was in the glass, or if he went around with just an empty glass in a social setting, which would be weird. But it seemed to me that it's one of those things where there comes a point where you have to break through the constraints of convention and do things that give you, as to use Kellie's word, joy. And I am sure after this conversation, I am going to participate in some joy.
Not with an empty glass. Not with an empty glass, I trust.
Yeah.
No. All right, let me pose one last question before we open it up for the audience to chip in as well. And this is partly looking forward to the future, and it's partly methodological. And Richard, I hope you'll forgive me if I invite Kellie to lead in responding to this. But in terms of how to communicate our findings to a broader general public, Kellie, I'll invite you to talk a little bit about blogs and other sort of social media. And then I'll ask Richard to do the same, knowing that he's also quite the expert in contemporary media. But in any case, my point here simply is that in terms of our influence as historians on the general public, or even on future generations of our own colleagues, prospective historians in the next several generations who are increasingly going to rely on social media, not just to communicate, but to do their work in other kinds of ways. How do you see the arena of modes of communication changing that we can be aware of and try to influence, perhaps?
That is such a good question. And that's something I think about all the time, because my students are on TikTok. You know, my generation is the podcast generation. We do podcasts. When I got into the field of history, I really intended to be sort of a traditional historian. I was going to be in the classroom. I was going to write books. I was going to write articles and get tenure and then retire. You know, like that was sort of the path. And now I realize that we almost have to expand. We really do have to expand the way that we do history. I don't think we need to take out the rigor. I don't think we need to take out the archive, the research, the peer review. I think that has to still be a part of it. But we have to also be willing to go where people want to listen. For me, that's been podcasting. I have found great success in podcasting. I think that for me, it's important because The Atlantic did an article not too long ago that there are a lot of these history podcasts and they're trash. They're not done by historians at all. They're people who are just getting on YouTube and, you know, regurgitating our stories, but very poorly. And so I think we need experts who can, you know, with charisma, communicate the urgency of this history. The stakes are so high. We're in a moment where book banning and the kinds of curriculum that is being discussed or marginalized is of utmost importance. And so figuring out new technologies, figuring out AI, figuring out how to, I have not mastered TikTok, but like all of the different ways in which you can reach your readers, getting beyond books and also writing op-eds and also writing shorter pieces, accessible pieces, pieces that people can easily read and make sense of, like making it plain, as Malcolm X said. I think that is going to be the next avenue that people, in order to sort of stay relevant, we are going to have to bring our history to where the people are. And I think that makes a lot of people uncomfortable engaging more in public scholarship because there are a lot of pitfalls with that too. We worry, I think, a lot about things getting diluted or things being rushed. That's the hard thing for me. Like if I'm writing an op-ed and they want my thoughts within 48 hours or sometimes 24 hours, that's really hard to do. You know, historians, we're like, no, we sit with this for 20 years before we publish something. But you know, that is what the world is sort of requiring right now. And it's a lot, but I think you can find your skill set and then dive into that. If it's podcasting, try that. If it's TikTok, try that. If it's shorter form essays, try that. If it's more webinars and forums and these sort of Zoom conversations like that, I support that. I think the more we can get our message out and stop just writing for like the 50 people in our field, but really writing for a bigger public, that's where the impact is to be made.
I thoroughly agree, although I have none of those skills. I'll be like Alice, sort of running fast to keep up. But all I ask of us as we reach out to the public is to remember the once driving force and salient feature of the good things that we do is that we write so that people can understand it. Mm-hmm. Do not write in sort of esoteric terms.
Yeah.
If as Benjamin Franklin said, the butler can't understand it, you shouldn't write it.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that is what we need to do. That is what we have to keep doing. Mm-hmm. And I must admit, I don't sit down and stew for long periods over what it is I have written. But nonetheless, I try to write in as accessible a term, using no jargon, using no highly esoteric terms. I don't need to talk to Joe and Kellie. I need to I want to write in such a way that Fred or Doris picking up my book could read it and understand what the hell it is I'm saying.
Yeah.
And what I'm trying to get at. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me that whatever medium we adopt to get our message out, and that's very important, is we need to do it in such a way that it is accessible. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'm reading manuscripts now and people who are studying the fugitive slave activities and resistance. And for the life of me, I don't understand what it is they're saying. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because they try to be so original and esoteric that they create words that do not exist.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why that is necessary. So You know, I think whatever it is, whatever medium we pursue, we need to be as 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 forthcoming and as accessible as we possibly can.
If I could add to that, I would just say you're absolutely right. And we need that writing in graduate school because we spend so much of our career, our early career, translating the dissertation into the book. It took me 9 years to turn my dissertation into a book. And part of that was because I had to rewrite and rethink how I was presenting everything. I wasn't just trying to make a point for the field. I really wanted a book that was accessible. And I think if we can get graduate students writing and thinking in a way much earlier, much sooner, making their dissertations clear and accessible. You know, we lower the barrier of entry when they try to turn these books. We need these books out in the world. We need these books to be published. We can't afford to have 10 or 15 or 12 years for you to get your book out in the world. And so I think if we show people how to do that in graduate school and then lower that barrier of entry in terms of publications and tenures, like we can create a much more robust scholarship that's not waiting every 20 years to get a new provocative conversation.
Okay, very good. I think we have now about 15 minutes, give or take, for questions or comments from the others who are participating in this session. Whit or Miller, can you help me out in terms of if anybody's got their hand up or any other signaling? Forgive me, I'm struggling with the old-fashioned technology here.
No, no worries. I actually am not sure where the hand raise function is in this, but I mean, we're not a enormous group. So if folks just want to turn on their cameras and ask a question, and I'm going to be the first one to do that because I'm already talking. So I love this conversation about accessibility and engaging with the public. But I want to look at it maybe from a different angle. There are thousands and thousands of museums and historic sites and historical societies across the United States. And I recently read a report that states that for a typical museum, it will take at least a decade for the latest scholarship to be translated into exhibits and other programming at these sites. That means, people are accessing history that is a decade or more old. And of course, that maybe fits in with what Richard likes because he likes a 7-year plan here. But I'm interested to hear from y'all how you want to see your work and maybe just the history of abolition of this idea of force being incorporated into the history presented across the United States at sites and museums.
Yeah, well, let me take a stab at that. I mean, it's unavoidable that there'll be a lag. That's the nature of the things. People have to get accustomed to the idea that there's new scholarships and old ideas and institutions that need to be reevaluated and incorporated on these different sites. So one example, of course, is how historical sites deal with slavery. I mean, it has changed fundamentally over the years. From when I first came to America, I went to historical homes and I left comments in the book like, nowhere in this exhibit do I find the S word. And I would get the presidents of these homes writing me a letter asking me what I meant by the S word. And I said, slavery. I mean, the person who owned this house was a slaveholder. Why haven't you been discussing it? The next time I went back to the house, it's not because of my comments. I don't want to make that claim, but it was clear that they have made fundamental changes. Mm-hmm. And those fundamental changes, they know will alienate a large portion of their clientele. Mm-hmm. And that they have to take into consideration because as an institution, they need to survive in order to carry out the work. And if they alienate too large a portion of their traditional viewers and clients, then they run the risk of falling apart. So it's a balancing act as far as they're concerned. But nonetheless, I have seen incredible progress on these ideas in many of these institutions. Places that I would not have gone to in the years past, I feel comfortable going now because I know that the curators are wrestling with these problems. And that is all you can ask of them, that they are open to new ideas and they are willing to do it. But there is a time lag.
Yeah.
Because it takes some time for them to read Kellie's book. And then say, and then, yeah, but mine's a door stopper. That's why it is. But then say, what does this mean? How does this apply to us? And how can we affect some change in what we do? So that takes time, and that's inevitable. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Let me chime in here. What about the flip side of this is what Kellie alluded to a few minutes ago, namely the backlash against that. So while we can applaud the new thinking that's giving rise to the innovations and how this material is being presented, donors and assorted right-wing groups and individuals are rebelling against that. And they're doing it very forcefully now and with a great deal of malice and forethought. I mean, this is just not random acts at a local school board or a local museum. This is being very highly bankrolled and very highly coordinated. So how do we respond to that, both in terms of message, but also the medium? How do we get the message out in a way to shield it to some extent from this kind of backlash?
Yeah, you almost need a campaign to protect the work that you're trying to do, because a lot of this comes down to funding. I mean, you want these files to be digitalized, that takes money. You want people to create these exhibits, you have to pay them. You want, statues or plaques or historical markers, that takes money too. And then even when you get the money, you need people who will support and defend and protect and make sure that those things can actually come to fruition. And it means that I think we have to have a lot more collective action when it comes to public history, that we can't just assume that, well, someone will do the work. Well, someone will tell this story. Well, someone will surely see the, I mean, going even back to what Richard said, the idea, he was not the only person that was like, are you going to talk about slavery? There has to be a collective group of people that are demanding that this is what they want to see and that this is what they want to be done, and also putting their money behind that too, as best as they possibly can. But it's an expensive endeavor, and it's will and resources, to be honest.
Yeah, and let me just add that to repeat, it takes time to bring about these changes, and time is long, as the old folks used to say. 2 weeks ago, I spoke at Leeds University in England on the unveiling of a plaque for a Leeds abolitionist who was active in 1850. And they have just got around in Leeds to put up a historical marker to the work that he did with people like William and Ellen Craft and Douglas and all the other Black folks who came to England in the 1850s and 1840s. So, but what do I do? I mean, I was standing there giving this lecture, and sitting in front of me is the Lord Mayor of Leeds, who is a Black woman. And I'm thinking, what is going on? This is not the Leeds I knew when I was a student in England. But the point is, it took them, whatever the math is, between 1850 and now, to decide to put up this plaque. And the only criticism I had of the character for whom the plaque was erected is that he was a temperance man. And everybody in the audience, interestingly enough, agreed with me. But so you see, the point is the lag, I think, is inevitable, and it and but it but all you have to do, as we have said, and we run the risk of repeating ourselves, is you have to keep plugging away. And there were some local folks who have been plugging away for 3 decades to get this plaque up, and they have finally persuaded both the university and the local political elite that this is what they should do. And this character, when I was working on a biography of the Crafts, I went and I found the 1851 census, and both William and Ellen Crafts stayed at this guy's house when they were in England. They lived, and they're in the English census, and he made sure that the census enumerator put in the remarks column and slaves from the United States of America. Nowhere else in any census in the 19th century would you find that. So this character was making a political statement, and we need to make something of that. And is that little tidbit made it possible to make a statement of the character, about the character and the struggles. But it took time for it to filter down through the ranks. And that tells you that there's a local organizing, committed group of people in Leeds in this period who do history from the ground up.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not doing podcasts. They're just taking people. They're just taking people of tours around Leeds, Black history tours, anti-slavery tours.
Mm-hmm.
And they are attracting large numbers of people. And Leeds in October is not a fun place to walk around if you come from the tropics. It's wet and miserable and cold. But the crowds are large and people are coming, and therefore they are having an effect. And the effect is seen in the fact that the city has come to the point where it can put up a historical marker for this person without causing any reaction for the moment. But to get back to Joe's point, there will be reaction at some point. And that's when the struggle begins anew. Because these struggles continue and will continue. They never stop. Yeah. Which is a depressing way to end this conversation.
No, we keep hope alive. We keep fighting.
You got to paint your shoes, Richard, and go out and dance. Go and dance and lead.
Yes.
Paint them yellow.
Can I ask one more question, just as a kind of wrap up? And again, I know that Richard doesn't read anything until 7 years later, but I would love to hear, actually, from all three of you, what are some of the best books, articles, dissertations that you've read over the last few years that have just really kind of shook things up for you? So thinking about even the younger generation, what are they working on that we need to be paying attention to?
Let me just add one, and that's because a force of circumstances found me as her advisor on her dissertation, and that's the person who Joe spoke with last year, Abino, and it's a wonderful dissertation that has all kind of original comments of the role of women who went into the South at the end of the Civil War in an effort to change things. And I think that it's a very original and potentially has all kind of opportunities to expand our knowledge about these activities. But I need to get her to turn this into a book and not take 9 years like Kellie did.
Yeah. I'll say I just mentioned at the top of the hour that I'm reading Making Sense of Slavery, which will be out in March of 2025 by Scott Spellman. It's a really good long historiographical essay is what it is. Like, it's not at all about what is slavery or what did slavery do. It's how do we make sense of it? What do we think about it? And how have our ideas about slavery changed from the 19th century to the present moment? It literally goes from, like, you know, the founding fathers to Nicole Hannah Jones. Like, it covers a lot of ground. But that book I thought was really good. I got a lot of book manuscripts, like I'm sure we all do, to read in advance. There's another book I'm really excited about by Tyler Perry. It's co-authored. It's about Hounds in Power. It's about how dogs have been used really throughout the world as a extension of white supremacy. And so how we see dogs in terms of slave catchers, how we see dogs in terms of German Shepherds and police forces, how we see dogs, you know, really evolving, but becoming intrinsic to enforcing white supremacy against Black bodies and against people of color. And I just thought the way it was done and the approach of it was so new and nuanced, and it got me really excited. So there's really good books out there too about Black women's history. Black women's history is having a moment, and I feel like I've been reading a lot of good stuff from like Kellie Gross to Nikki Howard or Nikki Taylor at Howard about Black women's history that is just very exciting to me, thinking about violence in a different way. So I don't know. I try to read as much as I can. It's easier though if it's on Audible because I can put it at like 1.5 speed and and listen very quickly to get it in.
Speed here. I didn't tell you about how my ears are failing me.
Yeah, I know. I know.
But it takes me 7 years to read a book, and you're reading a book that is not yet out. That is an impressive accomplishment. I
On
must
speed
add.
Oh,
mode too.
Only to review it, just to review it.
Okay.
Okay, the one that I'll offer up is Jadada Williams. I Saw Death Coming.
Oh yeah.
Which kind of, it turned me on my head, to be honest with you, because, you know, thinking along the lines of Richard and Kellie's work about the use of violence, even for self-defense, much less for broader perspectives in terms of advancing the larger intergenerational struggle. But this just took the wind right out of me. And to think of the flip side of all of this, excuse me, in terms of the trauma and then the recovery from the trauma and what that means through generations. It's just a stunning book in my view.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's on your 7-year list, right, Richard?
Yeah.
I'll add it to my 7-year.
National Book Award finalists. Pretty exciting.
Yes.
All right, how are we doing for time? Whit, Beller, time's up or what?
I think we're ready to wrap up.
Okay. Well, let me do that by asking all of us to sort of, in our own way, thank Richard and Kellie for a marvelous conversation. Clearly, their work is important. It continues to be important and will continue to be so into the future. And I'm so happy that we had the opportunity to engage the two of you in conversation, but also the rest of us. So we're very, very grateful for your presence here and your very significant comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thanks, Whit and Miller, for putting this together. We look forward to next year's installment. Maybe something sooner.
Yeah.
Yes, next semester will be our second classic texts in Southern history. And we haven't chosen exactly which one yet, but we will be doing a Du Bois work. So we will have scholars in conversation with one another about what a seminal work in Southern history tells us about the past, present, and future of Southern history. So stay tuned for that and hope to see all of you at the Southern Historical Association's annual meeting in Kansas City next week.
With our yellow shoes on. All right, thanks.
Bye, guys.
Bye, y'all. Thanks.
Bye.